Hello everyone, my name is Matthew Young. I made a brief video about my initial reactions and thoughts to the Light and Truth letter, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over the letter, just breaking it down. I have only read about a sixth of it, and that's when I kind of made the mental choice or the decision to make, you know what, I want to respond to this, and initially I thought, well, I could write my own response letter, I could make a website, and I was like, honestly, it's too much effort for me, at least right now, maybe later on. But you know what I can do? I can read through it and I can comment as I read through it. So we're going to start off here. Dear critics of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in 2014, I lost my faith. The Light and Truth letter is the culmination of my 10-year search for more light and truth. I just want to make one comment. This is interesting to me, this date, because I feel like a lot of people lost their faith in 2015 as a result of the November 2015 policy, right? So it's interesting that this was a year before. It is kind of outlined very similar to the CES letter here with things on the side. Austin Fife, okay. And I've seen some clips of this author, and he seems very, I actually have barely watched anything, but initial impressions are, he seems well put together, intelligent. Let's read this. So it's also doing the same thing the CS letter does with these quotes. I feel like if I wrote one too, I'd probably do quotes too. It's just a fun way to kind of frame things. Okay, avoid contentions and vain disputes with men of corrupt minds who do not desire to know the truth. I like this quote. I do. And it's funny because depending on your perspective, you could see it as like, hey, if you've left the church, avoid contentions with people who don't have a desire to know the truth. And then if you're in the church, you can view it the same way. If someone's just super anti, yeah. So I think it's funny how it goes both ways. In memory of E. Roland Brown, don't know who that is, but probably someone the author knows. Okay, Light and Truth letter, my search for more light and truth. August 2024, so it's pretty recent. Right, we're in September. Introduction, an open letter to the CS Letter Foundation, Mormon Stories, and other critics of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In January of 2014, I lost my faith. I confessed to my wife that I no longer believed in God, much less a Church of Jesus Christ. The conversation hurt, but it was a long time coming. Oh, so this is in 2014, was a long time coming. So it looks like Austin here was deconstructing for maybe some time before. Yeah, my loss of faith was gradual, and then all at once, I felt like my whole world had turned upside down. It hurt. I felt confused and lost. Wow, yeah. This is important, actually, for later on. It hurt. Whole world turned upside down. I felt confused and lost. My wife's reaction surprised me. She did not panic or get defensive. Instead, she told me how excited she was for my faith journey. I thought I was leaving the church, but she reframed what I was feeling as the start of a journey. And she made me promise if I could find more light and truth outside the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, she would follow me, and she meant it. It has been 10 years. I have read the CS letter several times and listened to many interviews on Mormon stories. I spent countless hours hearing and reading from ex-Mormons and other critical Christians. I've learned a lot in my honest and exhaustive 10-year search. Over time, I felt unsettled about atheism or agnosticism, and I discovered things that forced me to re-examine my unbelief. As a result of my search for more light and truth, some questions troubled me. The following issues are among my main concerns. I am curious personally. I know it's just a brief thing, but I guess for me, like, I've read the CS letter several times. Like, I want to know, like, actually more in depth, like, did you read all the responses to the CS letter and then the responses that the CS letter author wrote to those responses? What interviews did you watch on Mormon Stories? Did you engage with LDS discussions at all? Or did you mainly just focus on normal interviews? Because I actually tend to avoid the regular interviews, and I prefer more of the, like, either scholarship or bringing on scholars, or, like, not just like, I'm interviewing this returned missionary. It's like, no, I don't really prefer those. I spent countless hours hearing and reading from ex-Mormons and other critical Christians. Like this, I'd be curious too. Other critical Christians, do you mean Bart Ehrman? And is it actually plural, or do you just mean the one critical Christian? Like, I'm just from my experience, like, who have you actually engaged with? What have you actually engaged? 10-year search, so 2004 is when this person would have started deconstructing Austin here. Anyways, I know it seems like I don't need to break it down this much, but I like that's what I like. I'm thinking, I'm I'm holding these thoughts in my brain as I engage with the rest of the letter. Okay, next disclosures. During one 6-month period in 2024, I collected most of the X, Twitter, Reddit, and other social media forum type comments quoted in this letter. We'll talk about that. Some comments have been hard to find again, or the original contributor removed them. I use brackets for clarity purposes without changing the intended meaning. Any particular comment is not important. I see the essence of every statement listed here almost daily on social media. My goal is not to make online commentators feel bad, but to illustrate the arguments of critics in the church online. Throughout the letter, I use the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ, and the church interchangeably. I define the church like Elder D. Todd Christofferson, D. God Christofferson, does in his October 2015 about, okay, why the church? Jesus organized his work in such a way that the gospel could be established simultaneously. This is going to be a long video, everyone. Established simultaneously in multiple nations and among diverse peoples. That organization, the Church of Jesus Christ, was founded on apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. The Lord reestablished the Church of Jesus Christ once again through the prophet Joseph Smith. The ancient purpose remains. That is to preach the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ and administer in the ordinances of salvation. In other words, to bring people to Christ. Is this a quote from this talk? Because right away, critical scholarship would say that Jesus Christ did not organize a church. We have no evidence for that. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying there's no evidence for it. I do not represent the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The thoughts, opinions, and questions in this letter are my own. If you wish to contribute material or feedback, please visit this. Isn't that just the main thing? I already went here. Anyways. Okay, next. Fair use. Sure, I'm also using this under fair use. Okay. Here's how you know I'm a Mormon in Utah. Swig. It's actually just water, though. Fruit water. Okay, manipulation and fallacies. We're going to spend a long time here, everyone. So there's a quote from John Dehlin. There's something fundamentally immoral to presenting a narrative that people build their entire lives upon. They decide what to do with their education, how much money to give, who to marry, when to marry, how many kids to have, what professions to pursue. There's this massive amount of decisions that you make. You know, in a finite life. And to base that life on a narrative when not only the narrative isn't what it claims to be, when leaders know the narrative isn't what it claims to be, and intentionally, for as long as they could, withheld the information that would allow people to make an informed decision about how they spend their finite time and resources. That's profoundly immoral. I would agree with this. And not just in regards to Mormonism, but in regards to any religion. I think that not sharing or hiding things and not sharing the whole truth and then having people make significant decisions on that is immoral. Jeremy Runnels. The past year was the worst year of my life. I experienced a betrayal, loss, and sadness unlike anything I've ever known. Do what is right, let the consequence follow now holds a completely different meaning for me. I desperately searched for answers to all of the problems. To me, the answer eventually came, but it is not what I expected or hoped for. Okay, so this is important. We're going to come back to this. I'm going to reference this because this is important too. Random Twitter comment. The church is coming apart at the seams and we can all see it. Another random Twitter comment. Why I left, but don't leave it alone. The Mormon religion is false. It's made up. It's based on a con man's lies that destroys families and harms people with its lies. Of course, I'm going to help people get out. I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was baptized at 8, a missionary at 19, and married at 22. Classic. I graduated from Brigham Young University at 23, which, by the way, just so everyone knows here, real quick. First off, in my initial video, I was talking about how I have no formal college education. Just want to clear the record. I don't think it's a huge deal at all. I went to one semester and dropped out. So technically, if you want to gotcha me, I have a semester. Second thing is, just a little bit about me. I went on my mission when I was 20, came back, got married at age 24. Didn't go to BYU, didn't graduate from college. I was also baptized at 8, whatever. So this is me. That's my little spiel. I'm right down the middle, average member of the church. Same. I served in various callings from several wards and stakes across the U.S. I never planned to have a faith crisis. Same. Most people who know me are surprised to hear that I seriously considered leaving the church. In the 10 years since I first admitted that I did not believe in God, I've seen other members leave the fold. Whenever I saw a social media post from a friend or family member outlining their decision to remove their names from the records of the church, it felt uncomfortable. The natural question would always surface, what do they know that I don't? Initially, during my faith crisis in 2014, I identified with the church's critics. I felt like we were a like-minded group of enlightened non-believers. My experience in the church had been so positive that even when my doubts deepened, I was convinced that the church was a force for good in the world. Gradually, that changed. I started to believe the critics. The more I heard from disillusioned members, the more I felt like maybe I was wrong about the Church of Jesus Christ. Perhaps the church is much worse than I ever realized. Perhaps it is. I was ready to leave, but there was a problem. I'm not sure when it happened, but eventually I started noticing a long list of techniques being employed against me by critics of the church. I could begin to see that I was being tricked into accepting false premises and half-truths. This is important. We're going to come back to this. That is when I developed serious concerns about how critics made their case. I'm excited. Below is a list of tactics and fallacies I've identified over the years that many critics of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints use, and why each is manipulative or wrong. So, before I continue breaking down this letter, everyone, and this is going to be the meat. We're getting into the meat now. I'm going to say this. You can make a case that a lot of what we're about to go over, because this letter is written to critics, quote unquote critics, is true because that is how those critics that Austin here has engaged with have done. I personally have seen people on the internet. I have seen, Twitter or Reddit or even people in certain interviews or YouTube videos. I have seen people who make incorrect statements, who maybe say statements that could be considered half-truths, who jump to conclusions on both, first off on both sides, but particularly for this letter on the out group, the critics of the church. But what I'm going to engage with here is, what is I'm not trying to set up a straw man and knock it down, right? So this person can pick like the most bad faith critic ever and find like a Twitter user who's just unhinged, because Twitter or X is unhinged. It's so bad. Like, I can find anything to support my narrative off of X. Like, I can find any oh, look at how abusive and horrible these members of the church are. Like, I've seen some horrific things said by members of the church on Twitter, and I've seen the opposite. I've seen horrific things said on the opposite end. So when it comes to me and my search, my quote unquote search for truth, and how I'm going to break down this letter is, what do the best voices have to say? So I'm sure you're going to meet people who present to you half-truths or false premises. But when it comes to John Dehlin and LDS discussions, right, some of the best content out there, that's what I'm going to be judging these manipulation tactics off of. When it comes to Bill Reel or Radio Free Mormon, that's what I'm going to be basing these tactics off of. Because I'm going to say, hey, because you're saying, hey, I began to see that I was being tricked into accepting these things. We're going to break these down and see, hey, are the biggest and most prominent critics actually engaging in these manipulation tactics? Or are you just finding these manipulation tactics among bad faith individuals who are on Reddit or Twitter or who don't have prominent saying? So that's how I'm engaging with this. With that crazy disclaimer over with, let's engage. So, distrust in authority, assuming that any institutional structure with a hierarchy is up to no good. If the church donated that money, so here's the example. If the church donated that money, it must have been for nefarious reasons. The attitude that anything positive the church does must have had sinister motives. Okay? So, for this one, I don't see... Okay, I could see maybe someone like Radio Free Mormon engaging in this, but not in the sense of like it must have been nefarious, more inquisitively as I wonder why they did that. And let's take a step back. Why would this even be a thing? Why would there be a distrust in authority? Because this is, quote, a manipulation tactic that critics engage in. There's a distrust in authority of the church's structure because they have proven to be untrustworthy. So it is not a manipulation tactic to question a lot of the church's motives, or if they do something, to question it for nefarious reasons. A great modern example would be the SEC scandal. That is how they have misused members' funds and tithing, and how they lied about it to the government, and how they had to pay a fine using members' tithing money. So that's a misuse of it's a mishandling of funds. It's lying and obfuscating those funds and lying to our government. It's breaking laws, which we don't believe in. We believe in working with the laws. We believe in being subject to governments and institutions. And it's not being transparent to the members. And it's not being accountable either. No one came forward to be accountable about that one example. There are other examples, such as Holland saying that the church never donated to Prop 8, the California law, and then come to find out that they did. And his quote was not 1 red cent was donated to Proposition 8, and then come to find out, yeah, there was more than 1 red cent. It was like $1 red $1 million, or it was more than that. But so it's not a manipulation tactic if it's just true that the church absolutely has used money for nefarious reasons, and it is not a manipulation tactic to then, once I find that out, to be like, hey, I'm just going to question everything the church does because I no longer trust them because they have lost my trust. So I don't consider this to be a manipulation tactic. This is designed to make the target distrust church leaders. The manipulator wins if the target believes they cannot trust the church. Once again, it's not a manipulation tactic if the church actually hasn't been trustworthy and if the leaders themselves have not been trustworthy. I would point you to Nemo the Mormon and his breakdown of top 15 lies said by modern LDS leaders, or something like that, I believe is the video title. So it's not the critics, actually, who cause this distrust in authority. It's the critics who say, hey, look at how they lied here, or look at how the church misused these funds. Maybe you shouldn't continue to trust the church moving forward because they've violated that trust of yours. So this one I don't agree with. I don't think it's a valid example. Obviously, just distrusting an institution because it's an institution could be wrong, but actually I'm a very firm believer that just in having an institutional structure does come with inherent corruption. I've seen it in every single workplace I've been in. I've seen it in the church itself, like in my mission. I think that it's just a thing, it's a way of life that if I have an institutional structure, there's going to be a level of corruption, and there's going to be bad faith actors within that structure, and that's why HR exists, to deal with those things, and not necessarily to be like good, but HR exists because it's like, hey, we know that stuff isn't going to go right, and so we need to be on top of that. So actually I think it's fine to have I think it's fine and healthy to have a skepticism and a healthy distrust in authority. I think it's a very healthy outlook on life to question, okay, what is this authority? Why am I allowing this person to have authority over me? Why am I choosing to follow this authority? I think that's perfect. Those are perfectly fine things in every institution to ask. Do you now see why this is going to be a long video? Okay, myth of infallibility. An assumption that church leaders are infallible. So I don't like this one because I don't think anyone has ever realistically believed this. I do not think that anyone thinks that church leaders are infallible. I just don't. I don't think that's true. I never believed that growing up. None of my friends believed that growing up. None of my family members believe that. No one believes that. I've never actually met someone who actually believed that the church leaders can do no wrong. If anything, they have consistently said to me they are fallible, and when problems come up, that's the first thing people say is, well, they're fallible. They're just men. So, okay, any quote or policy from the church leaders in the past that does not align with what we practice or believe today. It assumes something that restoration never does, namely God's servants should be near perfect and not succumb to popular false teachings. The formula for critics is easy. 1, assume church leaders are infallible. 2, show an example of fallibility. Okay, so this is not what they're doing. So this is bad faith, because this is not what critics are doing when they are showing problems with. In this example, this is not what's happening here. So when we have a critic who takes a quote or policy from church leaders in the past that does not align with what we practice or believe in today, they are not assuming church leaders are infallible. And they're not just showing an example of fallibility. They're showing an example of why in the past church leaders have gotten things wrong, which means you should be skeptical of current and modern church leaders right now. So a great one is all the prophets and apostles, many of whom gave talks in conference about black people, and how I think some of the more horrific ones would say things like, that Negro man is going to be a servant in heaven, and he'll go to the celestial kingdom as a servant. Things like that. Or the quotes about how people's skin will turn white, how the Lamanite skin is turning white. Very horrific, racist things. When I show that to you, I'm not saying church leaders should be perfect and look at how they're not perfect. I'm saying, hey, look at how wrong they were about the civil rights movement. Now today, don't you think that they could be wrong about the LGBTQ movement? There's nothing about infallibility there. If anything, I'm saying you need to recognize that they are fallible, and I'm not, no one's ever assuming they're infallible. I'm saying we should all be on the same page that they are very fallible, and you should keep that at the forefront of your mind before blindly following these men. So I've never personally seen this example of assuming the church leaders are infallible and then just showing an example of fallibility. Almost every time. In fact, I'll say every time I've seen this happening, it's only been to highlight how prophets cannot be trusted to get things right, which should be a healthy dose of skepticism of why am I going to continue to follow these men if they aren't ahead of the curve, if they can't see around corners, if they essentially aren't prophets. False compromise, presenting opposed narratives and then assuming, well, the truth must lie between these two extremes. So the example is Joseph Smith said he translated the golden plates with the gift and power of God. However, he was just a treasure-seeking, peep-stone-looking fraud. Critics do not need their target to agree with their view. They only need the victim to reject the traditional narrative. The middle ground between truth and lies is not where the truth is. So there's so much to break down here. I'm sorry, this is insane. This is a huge problem with when I was reading through this letter is the amount of effort and time it's going to take to just break down, sort and sift through the shiz, because that's what it is. The garbage. I have to break down how bad all of this is. Requires a significantly greater effort than it was just to write this heaping pile of crap. And I'm comfortable saying that. I think this is poorly written, and part of me got mad after reading the Light and Truth letter. I said, dude, I should write my own faith-affirming letter, even though I'm completely out. I can do better than this. And that's what makes me mad. I'm like, dude, I could write a better one than this. And you should be more capable of writing a better one than this. So, okay, so what's going on here? Why did this make me mad? Okay. So the example is Joseph Smith said he translated the golden plates with the gift and power of God. Okay. That's a quote that they use. Then the critic in response to this quote would say, however, he was just a treasure-seeking, peepstone-looking fraud. So the problem with this example is this is not even a claim a critic would make. This isn't even the full claim. If anything, the claim from either Bill Reel or Radio Free Mormon or John DeLynn would be something closer to Joseph Smith said he translated the golden plates with the gift and power of God. However, in that translation, he used a peep/seer stone, which he would use to defraud people through treasure seeking, would be the claim. This is such a weird thing to just say, he said he did this, but really he just engaged in this, because this doesn't address the first premise of the paragraph, okay? And I don't know why it's in quotations. I would love to see if this is actually something someone said, because it's so incompetent and horribly put together. The middle ground between truth and lies is not where the truth is. the thing is, this entire thing is true. That's another thing. It's like critics will put up this thing and make you believe that it's somewhere in the middle. And I'm like, okay, first off, this is just entirely true. Joseph Smith said he translated the golden plates with the gift and power of God. And I think it's by, not with, but by the gift and power of God. However is weird. He was just a treasure-seeking peep stone looking fraud. True. And this isn't even anti-Mormon. Like, you can hold both of these views and still be a full-believing Mormon. Like, Joseph Smith was arrested, I believe, 4 times between the ages of 19 and 24. That one I'm a little shaky on the dates and the ages. But he was arrested and tried for defrauding people out of their money by claiming that he could find lost treasure, by treasure seeking, by glass looking is what it was called, and how Joseph Smith referred to himself. And this is supported by, this is legal in court documents. This is supported by his own life and journals. This is supported by his, how he engaged with in his relationship to Emma's father, and how Joseph has a quote where he literally says, like, I promise I've never actually seen anything through these stones. I'm willing to give it up and work hard and earn a fair living if it means you'll let me marry Emma. That is roughly the quote. So, like, you can hold both of these things to be true and still be a full believing member. And this technically is just all truthful. Critics do not need their target to agree with their view. They only need the victim to reject the traditional narrative. There's a problem because the traditional narrative is wrong. And that's not even my words. That's very high up people within the LDS church. We're talking faithful LDS historians, people who have written books, apologists for the church, straight up. I think there's a quote where one says, like, the traditional narrative cannot stand, or whatever. I think that's in the CS letter. Like, the traditional narrative cannot hold water, or whatever. It's not. It's just wrong. And so that's, yeah. I mean, and the victim. They only need the victim to reject the traditional narrative. Like, you're a victim if I inform you of the facts. You're suddenly my victim. It's like, dude, no, we can just have a conversation. Like, you can, like, that's the beautiful thing, is that there's people who can believe in and accept critical scholarship of the Bible and church history, and they don't play the victim card, and they don't choose to, like, many of them choose to stay within the church, and many of them became apologists and LDS historians, and it's just, I don't, even the framing of using the words used here are manipulative, by using words like victim, by saying, oh, the traditional narrative. And a lot of times, I don't think I've ever seen a critic ever employ this tactic of, I don't need you to agree with me. I just need you to reject the traditional narrative. It's like, all I'm doing is presenting you with the facts, and I think many times what gets conflated is what critics are claiming and what you think that they're claiming. So, like, a lot of people, for example, Radio Free Mormon, like, they won't even comment on, like, broader claims that really there's no basis, or there's no way to have evidence for. Like, also, I realize I don't even need headphones. I'm not even listening to anything. But, like, for example, sorry, I'm just gonna plug in my headphones here. Like, Radio Free Mormon, like, I think one of the most recent things I've listened to, he actually said, he's like, if Jesus appeared to me, he's like, I wouldn't reject him. He's like, I'd listen to him. Like, cool. Like, I would love that. Like, he's not sitting here trying to be like, there's no way God exists. He's sitting here saying, like, look, most of the time, what critics are actually doing is they're saying, hey, the testable truth claims, such as the historicity of the Book of Mormon, can be proven one way or another. But, for example, something like, is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints true? Or is it the true church for me? Or is it God's true church? Those are claims that cannot be, they can't be, like, scientific or historically or archaeologically proven. Like, they're personal. And almost every almost every critic I've ever seen doesn't even comment on those claims that are more in that realm of spiritual or personal. So that also is just the middle ground between truth and lies is not where the truth is. Also, yeah, truth and lies. This is not nothing in here is a lie either. And it's not even between two extremes. It's saying, like, we might point out, like, here's your narrative. Like, here you might think the Book of Mormon was translated with Joseph Smith looking at the plates and translating them, because that's what maybe you grew up seeing and that's the artwork you saw. But it's not a lie to say, hey, that narrative is wrong, and what he actually did was look at a stone and a hat, and the plates sometimes weren't even in the room, and they were covered, and he would read words off of the rock that appeared in the hat. Like, do you see how that's... I'm not needing you to accept the middle ground. I'm just telling you what the actual translation process looked like. And you can still hold your belief, and you might be like, okay, well, that's how he did it, and the church is still true, and the Book of Mormon is true. That's fine. The critic holds that belief and might be like, yeah, to me, I don't believe in that kind of mysticism or magical worldview, and so I don't think that that's true. So there's a lot wrong with this. False compromise. Presenting opposed narratives and then assuming. That's another thing. It's like, it's opposed. Who made the opposed narrative? Like, there's the objective narrative, the facts that we can find off of the church's website, the Joseph Smith papers. Almost everything about this narrative is from those two sources. Other sources would be like official government and court documents, like journals of those around Joseph. Like, there's so much that it's just like, okay, it's not an opposed narrative. It's more of the narrative. And now you can see how the narrative you were taught was actually written or taught to you to essentially distance itself from the real narrative. So that's also funny to me, like, who made the opposed narrative? Anyways, this whole idea, the idea that the critics want you to believe that the truth lies in the middle ground, is just not true. This example's horrible. I've never seen anyone engage in this type of behavior to try and get you to think that the truth lies between two extremes. I've seen people inform what the actual narrative is, and then what you take with that narrative is whatever you take. So, like I said, you can agree with this narrative and still be a full believing member. The big list: Gish Gallop, or proof by verbosity, an illusion of proof by the sheer mass of material provided. You mean like this? You mean like, oh, let me show you all these different ways that they engage in fallacies? I just thought that was funny. Your big list of fallacies where almost none of them actually apply. Good one, Austin. An illusion of proof by the sheer mass of material provided. I've never liked this argument, right? Because it's essentially like the overwhelm tactic is what it's saying. It's like, if I can just say enough things and all of them are half-truths, or even some of them aren't true at all, because there's so much, you'll leave. But the truth of the matter is, all of them are proven and accounted for and responded to on sites like FAIR and in books such as Rough Stone Rolling, that there's no illusion going on. There is just such a mass of material because there's so much. Like, have you seen the Joseph Smith Papers volumes? Fetch. I used to have one here. I think I moved it to storage. They're huge, and when you put them all out, they're freaking huge. That's a sheer mass of material. And it's like, I would never call that an illusion of proof, because there's so much material about the history of the church. It's like there's just a large amount of material. So, for example, when it comes to the Book of Mormon, yeah, there's an insane amount of material and claims and evidences to show that it is a 19th century document and is not true. And it's not an illusion of proof to show you the entire list. It just is. It just goes to show you that, hey, that's how much is actually there that you have to contend and deal with. But yeah, it's just funny. You also do the same thing to try and quote unquote prove the church is true or whatever. But the CS letter, it culminates the critiques of the Church of Jesus Christ truth claims. Yeah, and I would argue that 99% of what it says is true. I think he gets a couple things wrong. But then he fixes them, updates it, and responds to people's like responses and claims to his thing. So let's read what he thinks is going on here. Overwhelm the reader or listener. Critics who use this big list tactic want to create the illusion that even if one concern has an answer, there are 100 more. It is the hydra of manipulation strategies. The thing is, there is no good answer to almost all of the problems and claims of the church. There isn't. There are answers. They're not good answers. And just because there's an answer doesn't mean it is the right answer or a good answer. You can look at how fairs consistently and constantly change their position on multiple different questions over the course of years. However, this is a valid tactic. If I were to go to someone who's a member and I say, I left the church, do you want to know why? And then I just go boom, 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 and all I'm doing is trying to overwhelm them. I do see that, and that probably has been employed by critics. Is that employed by some of the people that like some of the major critics in Mormonism? So we're talking the CS, Jeremy Runnels, John DeLynn, Bill Reel. They have a huge library and category of stuff, but that's because they've gone deep and they've analyzed everything. And they're not presenting it to you all at once. In fact, they're presenting it to you in such small pieces, like LDS discussions. It takes him like 10 episodes just to get through some of the most fundamental and rudimentary claims about Joseph Smith. Like, he has a whole entire episodes dedicated to just one topic. That's not a big list. Sure, if I zoom out, that's a huge list. But it's like, yeah, dude, that's because we're going over everything. But I do agree that if you try and present someone at one moment all of the issues, sure. But that's another thing, is like, you can read these things at your own pace. And the whole point of the letter is to say, hey, these are my questions with everything. So this is a tactic. And I would actually argue that most apologists do this because they say, hey, if I can just answer enough things or show enough of this, then I can cause you to doubt your doubts, or I can cause you to doubt the validity of your information. Anyways, the big list tactic wants to create the illusion that even if one concern has an answer, almost none of them do. And if they do, they're bad answers that cause problems in other spots. There are 100 more. It's because there are thousands of issues, not hundreds. We're talking thousands. And if you're going to the CES letter, the whole point of the letter is to show you, he straight up says, he's like, these are all my problems with Mormonism. But when it comes to John DeLynn and them, they don't do this. They specifically only present things in specific episodes, and they go over just that information. John DeLynn's doing a 20-part series on a single book right now about on second-class saints, about black people in the priesthood ban. That's how slow he's taking it. This isn't a big list. It is a hydra of manipulation strategies. I don't know. There's hypocrisy going on here. There's not an illusion of proof if there genuinely is just a huge list of things wrong. I don't know. There's a lot that I don't like about this argument, but I understand where it's coming from. Like I said, if I were to sit someone down and then just overwhelm them with all the information, that is a tactic I can use to try and get someone and pressure them. But like, that's if I did that. Like, I sat someone down and did that. I just don't see that necessarily applying to things like the CES letter or a letter for my wife. Maybe, but like, it's also saying that it presents an illusion of proof, but there's no illusion here. It's just truths being hit, and you have to deal with them. So, a half-truth. This is so rich. Mixing truth with deceit to confuse the issue, like the LDS topic essays, like how the race and priesthood one talks about. In fact, you know what? I'll just show you right here. LDS topic essays. Might as well just get into it here. Like if we go to race and the priesthood, and then we see I gotta find it here. Hold up. It's going to have a footnote, so I know it's going to be one of these blue things. Give me a second. I found it just like a month ago. I was looking into this. Maybe we scroll down. No, that's the whole thing. Okay, it's up higher. Sorry, I should have been a little more prepared, but this is just off the cuff. That's the whole point of it. Okay. Sorry, I'm just skimming it, so maybe tap the screen or skip ahead a little bit here. But it's the quote from Brigham Young, and they misuse it, and it's a half-truth, and they misrepresent the quote. Here we go, found it. And it's not linked blue. Interesting. Okay. At the same time, President Young, Brigham Young, said that at some future day, black church members would have all the privileges and more enjoyed by other members. So they're using this. Look at how they use this. They're saying, hey, the church and American racial culture, they're saying, hey, Brigham Young taught that one day they would, right? And that's how they're employing this statement. At the same time, President Young said that at some future day, black church members would have all the privileges enjoyed by other members. This is to use this and to say, hey, and then look, it happened, is so disingenuous, because if we now scroll down to, hold on, footnotes, here we go. Where are my footnotes? Did they remove it? Oh no, look it. Here we go. So we can click on this. These are the actual documents. This is still on the church's website. Open in viewer. Close. Okay, can I see the freaking... Excuse me. Oh my gosh, where's the freaking transcript, dude? Hello? Transcript, hello, please. It's January 23rd. I know that. Sorry, guys. This is such a... It's important to me, though. I want to see this. Okay. Oh my gosh, it really just... Okay, so this is what I have to use. Can I not have... Oh my gosh. You're going to make me do this. There's a way that I know that they have a transcript where someone has gone in and done this, like, transcript. Can I not just... Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm sorry. You can see that I did this on my phone and it was different. Hello? Okay, speech before this. It's on this speech, please. So if I click here, January 23rd, I know it's going to take me to the same thing. But I'm going to show you how they misuse this quote and give me a half-truth, the actual official church website. And you can do this, by the way. There are other things that you should click on because they misuse quotes like this all the time. And not just in this, in their books. Like I have a book by Tad Callister, A Case for the Book of Mormon. He'll do the same thing. He'll use these quotes. Restriction level open to research. Imagine all the documents that are actually just restricted. Open in viewer. Ugh. Share tangent. Okay. I can like barely read this though. That's the whole speech, huh? Okay. Oh my gosh. I'm just gonna look it up, dude, because I know that there's a thing that I can it's just written. When I pressed enter on the search bar, it ended my last recording, so that's fine. Here it is. Found it. Gave me a second to take a breather and actually find it. So here it is. If you want to see it yourself, this is the same place I was at before, church's website. Until the last drop of Abel's blood receives the priesthood and enjoys the blessings of the same, Cain shall bear the curse. Okay, so just saying it's in here, and I read that. So I found an actual transcript that's freaking written out. I know that there's a way to do this on the church. I just don't know how to access it. But this is it. The Lord God said that cursed be old Cain, and God said that only after the last drop of the blood of Abel receives the priesthood and enjoys the blessings of it, then Cain is calculated to have his share, but not until then. Consequently, I am firm in my belief of servitude. So, horrific address by Brigham Young here. I'm firm in my belief of servitude. But he's saying that black people who bear this curse of Cain will not receive the priesthood until the last drop of the blood of Abel, a.k.a. white people, receive the priesthood and enjoy the blessings of it. Okay? So that's a problem, because the church is using this quote to say at some future day. But to Brigham Young, at this quote, some future day, did not mean, oh, someday we'll receive the revelation. No, he meant, hey, in the millennium, after all the white people have had the option and the opportunity to have the priesthood, then black people, then the people who are under that curse of Cain. So that's a problem. They're using that as a half-truth. They're using this quote from Brigham Young as a half-truth to deceive you, to manipulate you. Anyways, you can look more into this. There are other instances, I'm sure. I just wanted to bring it up as a small example here of how the church itself and apologists, and you'll see even in this letter, you, Austin, you use half-truths and you mix truth with deceit to confuse the issue, to confuse people from the critical position. You do it all the time. I'm going to point it out nonstop. You are so guilty of this. The CES letter seeks to explain how Joseph Smith came up with so many unique place names in the Book of Mormon. A table lists place names and potential candidates in and around upstate New York. The idea is not a half-truth. It is more like a 10th truth. Most modern cities on the list did not exist until after the publication of the Book of Mormon. So I bet this is a half-truth by you, Austin, because I actually bet that you're right in saying most modern cities did not exist, but I actually bet all the things on this list existed either. I'm pretty sure on the CS letter he talks about when they existed. But also, I do agree, this is the weakest point of the CES letter. I'm totally fine saying that. Hold on, I actually just want to go see the thing now. If we actually click on... Can I just read it, dude? Let me read the letter. Can I please read it? CES letter. This is it? No, this is a video, dude. HTML English. Book of Mormon. Okay, this. So he's showing these maps, okay? Many of the Book of Mormon names placed tracking some local names in a region where Joseph Smith lived. The following two maps show Book of Mormon geography close to Joseph Smith's geography, okay? He presents these maps. So he's saying that most of these are modern names that were then placed after the publication of the Book of Mormon. Update. Additional information analysis can be found here. So this is the thing. Apologists have probably used this and said, hey, not cool. And Jeremy Runnels has taken the time to look at this. This is what I'm saying. It's like, Austin, dude, this is one thing I'll talk about a lot. Dude, how do you go 10 years investigating the church and listening to critics and watching John Dillon? How do you go 10 years? I've been doing this for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. How do you go 10 years and not engage with any of this? Like, genuinely, it speaks to how serious you took it, because other people take it way seriously, way more seriously than you did, because they take the 2 seconds to click on the link and follow this. Look at this. Several of the towns on this author's list were not even in existence at the printing of the Book of Mormon. Where did we just read that? Right here in your half-truth that you're claiming is a half-truth. Other locations were remote villages hundreds of miles away, places like Canada, but verdict debunked. Here's his response. Several of the towns on this author's list were not even in existence at the printing of the Book of Mormon. That's literally word for word what you said was a half-truth, Austin. This was true in the original CS letter that I wrote 4 years ago, which I immediately corrected when the errors came to my attention. It is not true for the updated revised CS letter today. So that's a false and misleading claim and statement from Dustin. I've already done a thorough line-by-line detailed response and rebuttal on this. I've already gone through this with Fair Mormon, and I revised the list based on evidence. You can find my response here. And by the way, this Light and Truth letter is August 2024. I would be totally fine giving you, Austin, the benefit of the doubt if you wrote this before Jeremy Runnels addressed this issue and updated it. Because, yeah, that might be a problem. But literally right there, he's like, I was wrong. I updated the list. The list that we're reading here is true. Nothing on here is a half-truth. And then this is his link to Fair, where he sits here. And I'm not going to go through in this video. I've done this before, though. I've gone through these responses. And he goes through and he finds, and he responds to them. And look at these responses. You can delve into these issues. Look at these. Look at all these. He goes name by name. So we have no half-truths here, Austin. So it's not even a 10th truth. It's actually the whole truth right now. And at the time you wrote this, you would have known that. A half-truth is still a lie at its core. It is more destructive than a lie because a half-truth requires untangling the lie from the truth. Like what we just did, Austin. Nice. See, this is why I'm reading through this list and I'm getting mad, because I'm like, dude, why? Like, you make yourself look bad when you claim the critics are telling half-truths and then they're not. And then you told the half-truth. You told the half-truth. You could have said that the CS letter previously had place names that were incorrect, but it updated it. And it says 4 years ago, but I'm pretty sure this was not 4 years ago. I think he updated it, and at the time he wrote this, it was 4 years ago. But that's just me saying that. It probably could just be 4 years ago. Anyways, ridiculous. That's why you're hurting people with this letter. People who read your letter and actually have the time and engage with it. This was my initial thing when I said my initial thoughts to Light and Truth letter. You are hurting people with this letter because they're going to look at this and then they're going to feel betrayed and lied to by you. And then they're going to double down on the critics. This is going to do more damage and harm to people's testimonies than anything else. It's easier to, look, I read this stuff and I still believed in the church. I read through these and I still believed. When I read this Light and Truth letter or something from Fair, and I see how disingenuous all of you are and how the very things you claim other people are doing, you are actively engaging in, that is what kills and hurts my testimony. How can people who claim to fight for the church, how can the church's best answers, how can this Light and Truth letter that's supposed to save me, that I'm going to send to my oh my gosh, what's the term? My disenfranchised? No, my family members who have been disenchanted, I guess, who've left, disenfranchised, I guess, or something, brain fart there. But like, why am I going to send it to them if you're just going to hurt them, if you're going to fill this with lies? Oh man, it's so frustrating. Which is why it's like I could write a whole opposite, like even more light and truthletter.org, and I could respond to all of these one by one and go through and show you these things. But it's like, dude, I'm gonna get so lost in the sauce. I've already been going at this for almost an hour. Do better, Austin. Fix this. Presentism. Assuming historical figures see the world in the same way that a person would today. Judging the past based on today's standards. Yeah, this is actually what apologists do. Once again, it's funny. Maybe I'll show you examples, but once again, we're going to get so lost in the sauce if I do this, but this happens. The church will do this. For example, regarding Joseph Smith's younger wives. People say it was back in the day, like people were doing that. No, they weren't. That's presentism. They were not. Like, I don't know. It's just hard. So they'll accuse critics of presentism, saying, well, you're just holding him to a standard that wasn't there. But the thing is, that standard was there. Joseph Smith shouldn't have been marrying young girls. It was just as bad back then as it was today. The average age of marriage was like way older than what Joseph Smith was marrying. Like, it's hard. Okay. So let's see his example. Church leaders phased in the word of wisdom from its 1833 introduction to 1921. That was when it became required for a temple recommend. Critics point out that early church leaders did not adhere to the word of wisdom as we know it today. Yeah, that's just true. Once again, this is just true. There's no presentism here. I'm not, and the thing is, when I've engaged with this, I don't judge them. In fact, I bring up these issues so that people don't judge other people. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, they were drinking coffee or they drink alcohol. Like, personally in my life, like, my wife has told me as a deal breaker, if you drink alcohol, that's a huge red flag for me, right? So that's a judgment based on an action. Instead of pointing out that, hey, all of your founding prophets and a lot of the early saints drank not only coffee but alcohol, like, it's to get other people to not judge. This is how I engage with that. Judging people in the past based on today's standards is popular but misleading. Imagine getting speeding tickets for driving 35 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone in your neighborhood, except that the speed limit was only recently changed from 35 to 25. If critics lived at the same time as people they criticize, they would believe and act similarly or worse. Or better. Like, I don't know why it's immediately or worse. That's the thing. Like, it's Bill Reel who says it, but someone asked Bill Reel, do you think you could have done a better job than Joseph? And Bill Reel was like, absolutely yes. Like, it's a very low bar to, like, not proposition 12-year-olds for marriage. Yeah, easy. If critics at the same time, they would believe and act similarly or worse. Anything from 200 years ago seems weird without historical and cultural context. So here's another thing. Critics will use this to say, like, oh, treasure digging and peeps and seer stones were common back then, and you would have believed the same. No. The president at the time I think there's a quote from a president from before Joseph Smith lived, who he's condemning the practice. People looked down on this practice. There's a reason Joseph Smith was taken to court and charged for defrauding people because of this practice. Apologists will use presentism, or they'll use this argument of you're engaging in presentism, and they don't realize that no, we're not. No, critics aren't. Like, they're actually doing the right thing. They're saying, hey, in the cultural and historical context, actually not okay, not viewed as a respectable thing, looked down upon. There's a new book out, relatively new. I think maybe it's a year or two old now, called Glass Lookers. It's about Joseph Smith. It just goes over how, like, there were even things regarding his family where they were, like, shunned and judged by people. I think there was specifically one where they had threatened to dig up Alvin's grave, and Joseph and his family freaked out, and they went there or something. And they did that because, and it was like a newspaper story. They did that because the town was pissed at Joseph for being a grave digger, essentially, for trying to dig up people's remains, for doing those kinds of things. So, once again, I don't see critics engaging in presentism at all. I don't think I've seen a single instance of it, actually, from John DeLynn, RFM, Bill Reel, or Jeremy Runnels. I don't think any of them ever once have engaged in presentism. And I think that what they do engage in is pointing out bad behavior and saying this is bad behavior. And I guess the apologist's remark here is, this is not bad behavior. You have to think of it in its historical and cultural context. But even in that context, it's bad behavior. Like, why do you think Joseph was run out of every town? Here's one that was new to me that I thought interesting. We've all been told the story in the church of how Joseph was so persecuted. These people, like, came and tarred and feathered him and beat him up, right? That's all they say to you. Come to find out, right, that they brought with them during this whole exchange, first off, it was spurred by a man who was the brother of his sister was propositioned by Joseph Smith. And so this man went and got the mob, and the mob brought a doctor with them to castrate Joseph Smith, which people in the historical context, people would only do that if they viewed you as like a sexual predator or rapist. And so to leave that out of church history, to leave out the fact that not only did they tar and feather him, but they actively tried to castrate Joseph Smith, it's like, So, yeah, it's not presentism to say that that's inappropriate behavior, because that's why Joseph Smith was so heavily persecuted, because even at the time, the things he was engaging in were considered highly inappropriate. Quote mining. Mining for unflattering quotes made in the past. Once again, hypocrite, or the whole Jeremy Runnels 4 years ago. 4 years ago, he got this wrong. Can we just point that out? That's insane. A meme on social media by Critic 6. Let's see this meme. My wife has borne to me 15 children. Anything short of this would have been less than her duty and privilege. It's a real quote. Apostle. Nice. George F. Richards, Relief Society magazine, July 1916. It is disingenuous scouring a target's social media feeds to find anything damaging is similar. To find anything damaging is similar. Hold on. Scouring a target's social media feeds to find anything damaging is similar. To quote mining, it's disingenuous, and it's similar to being disingenuous. I don't know how you're saying this. Often these quotes lack context or fall into the presentism category. No, they don't, actually. They never fall into the presentism category, and they might lack context, but I don't think the context helps you, Austin. I actually think if we go into context, like we did with the Brigham Young quote, turns out the actual full context is horrific, and the way that the church was using it was disingenuous. End quote mining. Meat before milk, presenting complicated issues without first establishing fundamental building blocks for understanding. No. LDS discussions, absolutely, goes from the very beginning and systematically and slowly builds up these issues so that you understand them fully. And they repeatedly tell you, hey, in every video past the first video, before they get into the topic, they say, hey, you need to go back to the first video to fully understand what we will be talking about today. And they're on like episode 50 or something, or maybe 40. They're in the high 40s or 50s. Dude, every video starts out that way. They go, hey, this is a series. It's a compounding series. These videos build on one another. Once again, tying back to what I said at the very beginning, you might find critics who engage in these behaviors. But if I'm just going off of the main highest profile critics that people are most likely to engage with, Jeremy Runnels, Bill Reel, Radio Free Mormon, Zelf on the Shelf, John DeLynn, they do not engage in this. So, presenting complicated issues without first establishing fundamental building blocks for understanding, blah, 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 blah. Mormons will believe they will all have their own planet. That's just a fact. That was taught. They believe that. Mormons will believe that they will get into heaven. I've never heard that, but maybe celestial kingdom replaced the term heaven for celestial kingdom, and that's just a true quote once again. Critics who use this tactic either, one, do not understand the issue, or more likely, two, understand it but know that jumping to the conclusion first will lead people to avoid engaging the church's sincere claims. Okay, so this is the example of meat before milk? I just tell people this to try and get people to... Hold on. But if we're... the whole point of this letter is we're not engaging in this letter because I'm a random dude investigating the church. We're engaging with this letter because, like, I'm a disaffected... That's the term I was looking for earlier. Disaffected. I'm a disaffected member who wants to know the truth. I'm investigating it. I'm in the church. So to assume that this is meat before milk, when we're addressing members, like the CS letter is addressed to the church, there's no reason for him to sit here and go, okay, well, in my letter, we're going to go back to the fundamentals and principles of the gospel. So, Like, no. The whole point of what he's doing is he's saying, hey, when I delve into these issues, there are problems. So I disagree. I don't think that that's a real thing. I think that most of the time, like you, Austin, meat before milk, you are attempting to, I think you didn't even engage with any meat. And I feel like you think that the milk of the matter is the problem, actually. It's going to become evident the more we go on that Austin here, after 10 years of intense study and pondering, and then, by the way, that was 2004. He said 10 years before that. And then another 2004, dude, another 20 years later. So after 30 years, Austin, you write this letter. And you have such a milk understanding of the issues, such a childish perspective, such a surface level understanding of everything that you're talking about. And you're going to leave out significant information, context, and it's just entirely evident in every sentence of this letter. And you're going to accuse the critics of meat before milk. You never engaged with the meat, my friend. I'm going to say that right now. Then again, you know what? Maybe this is used to keep people out of the church, and maybe that's valid. Once again, we're just talking about the things that people are most likely to engage with. But also, like, what's the milk required for this? It's like, Mormons believe they all have their own planet. Oh, that's weird. Why do they believe that? Because they believe that they're going to become equal heirs with Jesus Christ and God and have access to all that they do. There's your milk, dude. It's like 2 sentences. It's not, you're acting like it's this huge jump to be like, this. It's like, no. In fact, this is very surface level. Like, why don't we actually get into the meat here, Austin, and talk about how only people in the highest celestial kingdom are going to have their genitals? Why don't we get into the meat of the matter and talk about how everyone in heaven is supposed to be white? Why don't we get into the meat of the matter and talk about how these things were taught and then they're peddled back on? Or how about, my believing wife is going to be separated from me. I'm separated from all my kids in heaven, and she's given off into a polygamous marriage of someone who she does not choose, and she's a polygamous wife, and my kids are sealed to that new random dude that my wife has no choosing in. Why don't we get into the meat of the matter here, Austin? Why don't we talk about the actual meat? That's freaking milk, dude. That's nothing. Okay. And now we don't even believe this anymore, right? That's what the consensus is. Gordon B. Hinckley, I don't know that we teach that. Sick. Talk about a half-truth right there. And that little comment from him that he made on public television when directly addressed about this. When he had the opportunity to present the milk to everyone, if this is quote-unquote meat, I explained the milk in less than 10 seconds. You don't think the prophet at the time could have done that to the whole world? Nah. All right, let's keep going. Naturalist assumptions. Dude, this just... Oh my gosh. Naturalist assumptions, assuming no supernatural or spiritual forces are at play in the universe. Angels don't appear to men to give them golden plates. Critics who have naturalist assumptions are closed-minded by definition. They are limited in their pursuit of truth. Eliminating supernatural forces from the universe closes off an entire dimensions of truth. I understand this. However, what is happening most of the time is we're using the scientific method and we're using evidence. And you are right. For example, critical scholarship naturally chooses to view the Bible not through a supernatural lens, and it views it as if there's no supernatural spiritual forces at play. Because we do that, there's a whole dimension of truth that we get by doing that. So I'm going to give an example here, right? Because he's saying like, hey, it's not fair to just be like, well, we don't assume these things. So, and that closes off an entire dimension of truth. We'll never actually get the real truth by closing off that dimension, okay? And I'm going to argue that that's not true and that we actually get closer to the truth by closing off that dimension. Which, by the way, if you've ever engaged with Bill Reel or Radio Free Mormon or John DeLynn, less so John DeLynn, more Bill Reel, they absolutely believe in supernatural and spiritual forces that are at play in the universe. Are you kidding me?
Bill Reel went and did ayahuasca and talked about how spiritual and crazy of an experience it was for him. And he talks about how he does these readings based on your sign, and how he's like, it was surprisingly accurate, and this and this. Like, he absolutely has a spiritual side to him. Okay. But let me give the example that I said I was going to give. If I died, if I was shot in my home, or stabbed to death in my home, cops come over, I'm on the floor, there's multiple stab wounds in me, there's a bloody knife on the floor, and then my wife is there, and she's covered in my blood, and her fingerprints are all over the knife, and she's holding the knife when the cops get in there. And she says, "Oh my gosh, thank you all so much for coming here. I just grabbed this knife out of this demon's hands." And they go, "Demon?" She's like, "Yes, like there was this black figure, a shadowy figure with horns that grabbed the knife and repeatedly stabbed my husband to death." That's a supernatural force that's at play in the universe. My wife says that. For the police, they don't engage with that, because how's that going to help them find the truth of what actually occurred? There's a reason that we use scientific methods, because they're so good at getting down to the truth, that we've advanced in society so rapidly because of it. And you can see how if we were to allow in our court systems or in police investigations, for example, room for supernatural or spiritual forces, how many people would get away because it's not true. Like my wife, it would be so clear that, okay, my wife stabbed me to death in that situation. But then to sit here and be like, well, that's a naturalist assumption. We can't assume that what she said was wrong because you just don't believe in demons, but they could exist, and that's a manipulation tactic, right? That's what these all are, right? This is a manipulation tactic to say that, because you're eliminating a whole realm of truth. Like, think of all the demons that stab people to death in the world. It's like, that worldview would lead to so many crimes being unpunished. It would lead to a complete breakdown at the structure of law and of justice. That there would be a whole dimension of truth that would be entirely inaccessible if we allowed for supernatural forces to be at play. Now, that being said, a lot of times what I've heard from critics is they actually leave room for supernatural and spiritual forces, but what they're doing is they're saying, look, even if this all happened the way that Joseph said it did, there are inconsistencies even allowing for the supernatural and spiritual forces that are unaccounted for, or that are contradictory, or that don't add up. So even if we allowed this dimension of truth, I personally still believe that many of the claims brought up by critics would still be entirely valid. So I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, angels don't appear to men to give them golden plates. The same way demons don't appear and stab people's significant others to death. And eliminating that opens up the true pursuit of truth, because we can actually get down to what really happened, rather than leaving anything up for anything's on the table. So, like, for example, regarding the whole cities thing that we talked about earlier, I had a friend, and we both read the CS letter at the same time on our missions, and we would talk about it together. And he said, well, that's not a big deal to me, because Satan could have whispered in these people's ears when they were naming the towns what to name them to make it look bad for Joseph Smith. And it's like, you can come up with anything I can think of. Suddenly, you can't dismiss it because, well, you can't prove that wrong. You can't prove that Satan didn't do that. Seems like a pretty good idea to me. Why wouldn't Satan have done that? Of course he's going to want to undermine the Book of Mormon. Why wouldn't he whisper in people's ears what to name the city? It's like, yeah, but there's no getting to truth if we will just we will get closer to the truth by putting all of those on hold than we will by any other means, right? Like if the police just said, like, oh, that's what happened, okay, a demon stabbed me to death, and then they're done, versus the pursuit of truth would have been like, well, let's check this camera that he has. Maybe he was recording. Oh, we did. It turns out, well, look, it shows her stabbing him. It's like, oh, because we closed off the supernatural claims and we chose to investigate, we got closer to the truth. So that's another thing. Hold on, I think I heard my wife calling me. I'm just going to go check and make sure everything's okay.
All right, everyone. We are joined by my son now. He's asleep. Okay, continuing on. We just did naturalist assumptions. Bully on the playground. Use of mockery and name-calling. Oh, he's just a TBM, true believing Mormon. You're in a cult. So, and then we'll read this. Critics attempt to manipulate people into accepting their worldviews by name-calling or labeling. No one wants to hear what they're doing is weird. The method is effective, especially if someone is unsure of their convictions. So, I'd agree, but the thing is at least for the term TBM, we use that as terminology to describe. I say we as if I actually freaking even use these. I do use TBM, but we also use progmo, exmo, postmo, PMO, physically in, mentally out. It's not just we're name calling you, and it's not even you're a true believing Mormon. You're a TBM. I was a PMO for a long time, physically in, mentally out. So I view that more as it's just we're using that so that we don't have to. It's shorthand for the full thing. It's like saying you're using a name to mock us by saying Mormon. It's like our church name is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's I'm sorry, you're actually wrong. You're wrong, linguistically and just in regards to how people should engage with that. I don't think it's a good thing for people to only call the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Or I think it's fine to use the shorthand Mormon, especially because the church was okay with it and now they're not. But also, having a shorthand is necessary then, instead of saying that huge, long, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Another problem is, in using that term, it's caked into the term is a truth claim that this is the Church of Jesus Christ. Other churches don't have baked in truth claims into their names. But to say that this is the Church of Jesus Christ alienates and isolates so many people. Also, if we want to get into bully on the playground, this is ironic, Austin, because you just went on Ward Radio. And Ward Radio is notorious for name-calling and mockery of critics of Mormonism. It is hard to get through a Ward Radio episode because of it. This one, you're in a cult. This is objectively true. Mormonism fits the definition of cult. They engage in cult-like behaviors and practices. Under psychological models such as the Bite model, the church fits. I don't call the church a cult. I would call it a high-demand religion, but it fits the definition of a cult. It would be like saying Joseph Smith is a sexual predator. It is a true and factual statement, but it's going to be hard for you to hear, and you're going to say that that's mockery or name-calling. But it fits the definition. We have words, we have terms, we have definitions for a reason. To call Joseph Smith a fraud, once again, would not be called name-calling or labeling. It is a true statement supported by facts, evidence, government papers, actual criminal charges laced against him. So there are certain things where you might feel like it's name-calling, but they genuinely fit the label, or the shorthand is just shorthand. It's not name-calling, and we do it all the time. Or we use the term Mormon because baked into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a truth claim that alienates and isolates other churches. And they attempt to manipulate people into accepting their worldviews. That's why I use the term critics, right? By name-calling or labeling. No one wants to hear what they are doing is weird. The method is effective. Even though none of this said you're weird. Especially if someone is unsure of their convictions. We'll see if later in this letter if this is used against critics. So what were these? These are manipulations. So I think I've shown how almost every manipulation here is either used by the church, by Austin, the writer of this letter, or not actually used at all by the mainstream critics of Mormonism.
So now we're going into the next section, which ideally I would have separated the first video and then this video into those two different sections. But you know what? Maybe I will. I'll actually do some editing here. I'll edit the two videos together. So those are the manipulations. And then next episode, we'll get into the fallacies. So, okay. Thank you, everyone.